Good evening to our viewers here in Guyana and online. I am Travis Chase with the Tuesday, June 26 edition of the HGP Nightly News. Here's what you need to know this evening. Judges of the Caribbean Court of Justice have ruled 6-1 upholding the constitutional amendment on term limits for presidential candidates in Guyana, overturning the decision of the Guyana Court of Appeal. The ruling simply means that a person can only serve as president in Guyana for 2 terms. Royden James opens our broadcast with more details of this historic ruling.
Both the High Court of Guyana and the Court of Appeal had ruled that the presidential 2-term limit, as set out in the Constitution, had been unconstitutional. But the government believed that the 2001 amendments to the Constitution was intact and therefore challenged the Appellate Court's decision at the Caribbean Court of Justice. Cedric Richardson, a so far unknown man, had argued that he had the right to choose whoever he wants to be president of Guyana, and that Guyana's constitution should not have been amended in 2001 by Parliament to provide for presidential term limits. He had contended that the relevant articles could have been amended only by a referendum, a position that had been upheld by then Chief Justice Ian Chang. He had ruled that the amendment of Article 90 of Guyana's Constitution by way of Act 17 of 2001 infringed on Articles 1 and 9 of the said Constitution. In handing down his decision, CCJ President Justice Dennis Byron said that Mr. Richardson might have been misinformed.
But according to the international standards, residence requirements are allowed, provided they are reasonable. Limits on re-election also pursued the aim of preserving democracy and protected the human right to political participation. Term limits contributed to guaranteeing that periodic elections were genuine and to ensure that representatives are freely chosen and accountable.
Mr. Jagdeo has long distanced himself from Mr. Richardson and the 3rd term case, but many felt that it was Mr. Jagdeo who was behind the case to seek re-election to head the country for the 3rd time. The court, after examination of the historical background of the amendment to the Constitution, noted that it was passed unanimously by the National Assembly during President Jagdeo's term in office. The CCJ felt that it was clear that the amendment did not emerge from the desire of any political party to manipulate the requirements to run for office of president. The CCJ concluded that the Constitution was amended after extensive national consultation and therefore represented a sincere attempt to enhance democracy in Guyana.
The introduction of term limits did therefore not dilute or water down the democratic status of Guyana. He did say, however, that the restriction that only citizens by birth or parentage qualifying for the presidency of Guyana would at first blush seem discriminatory or at least controversial. But this aspect of the case was never fully developed.
Meanwhile, speaking to Nightly News from the Trinidad headquartered CCJ just after the ruling, the country's Solicitor General Kim Kite expressed elation that this matter is finally put to rest.
We are very happy with the ruling. It is what we have been submitting throughout this matter. So, Guyana could finally rest and be at peace.
Right.
What has happened is that the people spoke through their representatives in Parliament.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
So, and this is the final decision.
Former President Donald Ramotar also reacted to the ruling.
I always thought that the case could have gone either way, right? But I am not dissatisfied with the ruling of the CCJ because I think that we had reached that position after a lot of wide consultations that was taken throughout the country. And millions of dollars were spent on that very wide consultation. That's why I'm always appalled by those who are talking about constitutional changes and so forth.
If Mr. Jack Dio had intentions to run for president for a third term, the ruling by the Caribbean Court of Justice has made clear to him that he is not fit and proper to do so. Royden James, HGP Nightly News.
Thank you, Royden. After the break, Jack Dio reacts to the CCJ's ruling. Accept the ruling and move on, urges Minister Harmon. Stay with us. HGP Nightly News. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the HGP Nightly News. Opposition leader Barrett Jack Dio says he will respect the decision of the Caribbean Court of Justice, which debars him from running for a third term, but said many persons wanted him to be their presidential candidate. Mr. Jack Dio said he will remain the PPP's boss and intends to be a formal part of the PPP's government should his party win the next elections. Royden James reports.
The Caribbean Court of Justice has driven the final nail in Mr. Jack Dio's presidential ambition Tuesday morning, which means that the PPP will have to go looking for a new face to head their party into the next elections. Reacting to the ruling, Mr. Jack Dio said that he was expecting such an outcome and he is prepared to respect the ruling.
We've now had a ruling from the CCJ that has interpreted that law, and they've interpreted it in a particular way, and it remains our law. And so, as someone who has always complied with the law and an advocate for that, then this is the same position applies today.
Mr. Jack Dio said that many persons believed that he should have been the party's next presidential candidate, and he is certain that they will be disappointed with the ruling. He said the party had not yet made a decision on who their presidential candidate will be. Nevertheless, Jack Dio said that the CCJ's ruling will not stop him from running things in his party.
Now, I am the General Secretary of the party. I will remain the General Secretary in spite of the CCJ ruling.
Now that Mr. Jack Dio knows that he cannot run again for a third time, he was questioned on whether or not he has his eyes on anyone within the party to be the party's next presidential candidate.
I'm telling you publicly 3 things that I would give a premium, 3 characteristic traits that I will give a premium to in my own assessment of the candidates. So, okay, so if you expected me to say who the person is and when, the party will decide that. As I've always said when at the time, the party will decide the candidate.
Is there a woman among those that you like?
That would make it too specific.
Jack Dio said that should the PPP win the elections in 2020, he will play a formal role in government to lend his policy experience. He said, however, he will not get into specifics about the presidential candidate, at least not yet.
Mr. Jack, you're saying that that's too early, but if you're approached by the members of the PPP to become the prime ministerial candidate or even return to the post of finance minister, is that something you're willing to consider?
Those things, listen, I want something where I can work day and night for 3 days and then have 4 days to myself maybe. I'm getting to that stage in my life where I want time for myself.
There is speculation that Mr. Jack Dio is pushing Irfan Ali to be the PPP's next presidential candidate, but the old guards of the party are reportedly watching closely to block that attempt by Mr. Jack Dio, Nightly News was informed. Royden James, HGP Nightly News.
Meanwhile, Accept the ruling and move on. Let's build Guyana. That's the reaction of a senior government minister after that historic CCJ ruling. Moments after the Caribbean Court of Justice essentially ruled that two-term presidential term limits in Guyana must remain intact in keeping with a 2001 constitutional amendment, Minister of State Joseph Harmon was approached by Nightly News for a comment on the ruling. Accept the ruling and move on, urges the Minister of State.
The ruling itself, I believe, should bring to an end speculations. It basically says that the interpretation which the courts have given to provisions in our Constitution are important. It also reinforces the fact that citizens of this country can utilize the judicial process to get an outcome. So if you have a problem with the magistrate court, you can go to the next level, which is the High Court. You have a problem there, you can go to the next level, which is the Court of Appeal. You have a next level problem there, you can now go to the CCJ. And the CCJ, as our final court of arbitration, has ruled. So I believe that we have to accept this as a ruling by the final court and let us move on as a nation.
In July of 2015, former acting Chief Justice Ian Chang declared that the presidential term limit was unconstitutional since the amendment to the Constitution had not obtained the approval of the people through a referendum. Justice Chang had cited too the violation of the basic structure of the Constitution. In February 2017, Justice Chang's ruling was also upheld by then-Chancellor of the Judiciary Karl Singh and then Appellate Court Judge B.S. Roy, with the dissenting judge having been the acting Chief Justice Yonet Cummins Edwards. Minister Harmon, who is also an attorney at law, addressed whether or not Mr. Jack Deo could run for the prime ministerial candidacy. The other speculation, Minister, is whether or not Mr. Jack Deo can run for the prime ministerial candidacy. Can you clear that up, please?
Well, I can't clear that up. I get the sense that when you're talking about a presidential, I believe what the sense I get is that it's an injunction against running for elected political office again. Once you had actually served as a president, that it is really the highest office in the land. And so in the sense I get is that this is really what the import or the intent of the provisions of our Constitution is that once you've actually run and you had held that high office, that really you should not seek again elected political office.
Delivering the judgment, outgoing CCJ President Justice Dennis Byron said, quote, "The appeal is allowed. The orders of the courts below are set aside. Section 2 of the Constitution Amendment Number 4, Act of 2000, also referred to as Act Number 17 of 2000 in the Court of Appeal and Act Number 17/2001 in the High Court, is a constitutional amendment to Article 19 of the Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, having been validly enacted." Unquote. It's an affirmation of a fit and the proper Constitution of Guyana, says the Minister of State.
I don't believe that there is any winners or losers in all of this. What I believe it has done is that it has been an affirmation of our country's Constitution and the provisions of our Constitution, and that citizens can now feel that their Constitution is something which is a live matter and that can be vindicated in a court of law. So this is what the CCJ has done. And I think we must now look beyond the ruling and not look back. As a country, we have to look forward as to how we're going to take this, the people of this country into a level of prosperity. And that is the important thing as I see it.
It is no secret that Barra Jack Deo, who was elected President of Guyana in 2001 and 2006, wants to contest the 2020 polls. He is already on record saying that despite the outcome of the ruling, he would remain General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party. Travis Chase, HGP Nightly News. Minister of Citizenship Winston Felix has rubbished claims by the PPP that some 20,000 foreign nationals, mainly Haitians and Cubans, are being granted citizenship to vote in the 2020 general elections.
The minister declared that those foreign nationals who are unaccounted for may have left the country through the backtrack route, through the country's porous borders, and they are not being trafficked by the government or being registered to vote as suggested by the opposition People's Progressive Party. The minister was at the time speaking to reporters on the sidelines of the 89th sitting of Parliament on Monday.
For me to tell you that I can't account for how the foreigners leave Guyana, partly true, partly untrue. Because those two openings exist. And you have to assume that once you don't have in Georgetown, New Amsterdam or Bartico, particular Spanish communities or French-speaking communities, you know that the number of people aren't here, right? So if they aren't here, then they must have left illegally.
According to data provided by the Ministry of Citizenship to the Bipartisan Parliamentary Foreign Relations Committee, there are no departure records for some 7,255 of the 44,747 Cubans who arrived here in 2017. Also, of the 22,520 persons who came between January and April this year, 6,170 have not departed through recognized ports of exit. Neither have some 17,615 of the lot who came between 2013 to April 2018. Declaring that the registration of Haitians and Cubans to vote here cannot happen overnight, the Immigration and Citizenship Minister pointed out that the Haitians and Cubans would first have to be citizens and satisfy certain residence requirements before they could be allowed to vote in Guyana.
Unfortunately, while we can operate on the land, it is not so easy to operate in the Quarantine River because of jurisdictional issues which prevent us from chasing down a boat in the Quarantine River. Because anytime you're approaching 66, going straight on to Molson Creek, you have to determine where you are. So in order not to aggravate the situation, we operate on land, and that is inadequate because the Guyanese would encourage foreigners to leave by illegal means.
In the case of the Haitians, the records show an increased number of them arriving here, but not departing through established ports of entry and exit. Of the 3,515 who came in 2017, only 291 left, according to departure records. As for this year, between January and April, just 85 of the 1,238 who came officially left the shores. As a result of this, there are 4,377 Haitians unaccounted for between 2017 and 2018. The minister suggested they may have also headed through the backtrack route to Suriname or Brazil.
What has been happening is that there's a large diaspora of Haitians in French Guyana. So most of the people from Haiti who transit Guyana, they go to that area to reunite with relatives, friends, and so on.
Minister Felix said that Opposition Chief Whip Gail Teixeira, as a former Minister of Home Affairs, is aware of the failed attempt in the 1990s by the security forces when they embarked on shutting down the illegal entry and exit points in the East Berbice quarantine. Teixeira in the parliamentary committee last week said, I quote, "The issue is not who is coming and who is going. The issue is the numbers remaining and can't be found," unquote.
We went through that in the late 90s. We tried to close down contraband you had. It resulted into a death, a shooting between law enforcement and the citizens because they protested. So for Mr. Shearer to be writing the way she did is extremely surprising. For me, all she's doing is crying wolf in a crowded cinema. And the only thing that would do is cause injury to those who want to escape the wolf.
Minister Felix Ford added that soon Guyana may have to follow in Barbados' footsteps by removing the visa requirement for Haitians to enter Guyana. Roy Den James, HGP Nightly News.
Thank you, Roy. HGP Nightly News. An unapologetic mother of one was on Tuesday jailed for stabbing her cousin in the arm. The woman told City Magistrate Judy Latchman that she was not sorry for what she did. Trevon Vickery reports.
The Camberville resident Lisa Bob stood before Magistrate Judy Latchman smiling, apparently convinced about her innocence. Although through the trial she stated that she was provoked by the complainant, who is her cousin. The conviction outlined that on February 14 at Camberville Housing Scheme, she unlawfully and maliciously wounded Crystal Bob with intent to maim, disfigure, or cause her actual bodily harm. She initially pleaded not guilty. The unrepresented woman, when asked to lead her defense, told the court, "I am not sorry for what I did. I catch her and I deal with her because I was provoked." End of quote. Bob further explained that on the day of the incident, she saw her cousin walking. She stated that she pulled out a knife and began stabbing her because she dislikes her. The accused was initially sent for a psychological evaluation and deemed fit to stand trial. A stunned Magistrate Latchman in her ruling stated that she relied on the evidence by the 8 witnesses who testified on behalf of the prosecution. She noted that the evidence was not discredited. After the magistrate sentenced Bob to 1 year imprisonment, a clearly upset Bob began shouting and uttering expletives as she was escorted out of the court. Javon Vickery, HGP Nightly News.
The importance of giving blood cannot be overlooked, and with this in mind, the Tolmer Reid Rehabilitation Center kicked off Rehab Week 2018 with a blood drive to give back to society. Kristen Macklingam reports.
Donating blood is not only an act of kindness, but it saves lives. That's what the occupational therapist at the Tolmer Reid Rehabilitation Center, Calvin Laurie, wants people to know.
Giving blood is something that's really nice. It brings everyone together because who doesn't want to save a life? So giving blood would help persons with disability and somebody that's very close to you. So if they go to the hospital and need blood, you never know. From this blood donation drive that we're having here might be able to save their life and somebody that's very close to them.
He says that this is one meaningful way in which the rehab center could give back to the community in which it is operating, as well as the entire country.
We're promoting saving lives and reaching out to other persons. So, for instance, other children and adults with disability might need blood at some point in time, or your family member or somebody that's very close to you might need blood.
Meanwhile, according to a staff member of the Tolmer Reid Rehabilitation Center, Sharon Morangi, she started giving blood some years ago, and to date, it has paid off.
I think that giving blood is saving life, right? That's the only way. Not only doctors save lives, this is one way that we can save lives as well. And I see it as a good thing, and I would encourage persons to do the same. It's not only saving life, but you're actually increasing your health at the same time, because I see this as my body replenishing the blood and me being healthier at the same time.
She added that giving blood not only helps persons in dire need of blood transfusions and surgeries, but it is also a healthy undertaking for the donor's body. Reporting for HGP Nightly News, I am Kristen Macklingam.
Thank you, Kristen. Back in the courts, an elderly woman was remanded to prison for possession of over 1,000 grams of cannabis. She denied knowledge of having the illegal substance. Javon Vickery reports.
63-year-old Roxanne Carrington of Bartica was arraigned before the courts for being in possession of a large quantity of cannabis and cocaine. It is alleged that on June 23 at Bartica, she had in her possession 2,555 grams of cannabis and 1,451 grams of cocaine for the purpose of trafficking. She denied the allegation. The prosecution stated that the woman rented an apartment in Bartica and that the police also conducted a search at the said apartment and found the narcotics. Police stated that another man had brought the narcotics in a bag which contained several small parcels of the narcotics in Ziploc bags. She was arrested and later charged for the offense. She was remanded to prison and will make her next court appearance at the Bartica Magistrates Court on July 14. Javon Vickery, HGP Nightly News.
Thank you, Javon. Your sportscast is ahead.